where you are. I'm very happy to be chairing this session. My name is Lana Jurko. I'm from the Network of Education Policy Centers that covers a little bit of the region that is in the focus for this conference. Our parallel session today is on prospects of digitalization in education. And I'm sure in the last year and a half, we've realized the issues we have, the challenges we have, and how important is that digitalization in education becomes a real tool for our teachers and a way that we can continue education even in emergency situations. So we have in our session 4 presentations today. I will introduce one by one, and we will have after each presentation a very short time for a couple of urgent questions. If everything goes up to speed, I'm sure that we'll have some time at the end to cover a discussion altogether. So we'll start with the first presentation from Morwared Sherzad Rayana Fazli from Aga Khan Foundation in Afghanistan with the topic Schools 2030 and Digital Learning. Morwared, please.
Thank you everyone. I'll just start sharing my screen. I just hope everyone can see my screen.
Can we just ask everybody to turn their mics off while the session, so just the speaker should have their mic on. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can you see my screen? Thank you. Greeting everyone. I hope everyone is doing fine and keeping well. Yeah. My name is Morwared Sherzad and I'm Schools 2030 Program Coordinator for Afghanistan. And with me here is Rayana Fazli, who is Program Manager for AKF as well. Today, we will be going through how Schools 2030 in Afghanistan used and applied digital learning for children in mostly rural areas that have little or no access to electricity or internet. But before that, I want to go through I'm going to go through the digital learning program. I'll just want to give a very brief introduction of what Schools 2030 is. Schools 2030 is a 10-year longitudinal school improvement and action research project where we work with 1,000 school government across 10 countries to jointly develop new scalable models that lead to higher holistic learning outcome for all children who face a variety of barriers to their education. In Schools 2030, we use principles of human-centered design to and focus on the key transition years of students of age 5, 10, and 15 years to catalyze locally rooted education solutions that aim to inform and transform system-level approaches for improving learning outcome for learners at preschool, primary school, and secondary school levels, and some of the most marginalized areas of each country. But how Schools 2030 will achieve its objective? In doing so, Schools 2030 has designed a 6-step model for supporting teacher-driven innovation for holistic learning outcome. These 6 steps constitute the Schools 2030 in education intervention that is being tested each year over 10 years to determine whether or not learning outcomes will improve through a classroom-based, school-based participatory action research and learning improvement program approach. We are at the forefront of amplifying and empowering teachers, students, and school to design and implement solutions about what works from the community perspective. Underlying each one of these steps is the constant prioritization of whether or not the tool, process, or product being used is practical, relevant, and appreciated by teachers by bringing the power of decision-making to the classroom and community setting where it belongs. So here in the first step, we empower teachers to conduct rapid holistic learning assessment with their student using Promise 3 app and new learning assessment tools. And the step 2, we support teacher-led 10-phase human-centered design process for designing new learning improvement solutions for their classroom and schools. In the third phase, we enable teachers to receive school-based grants to support the school-level solution over the academic year. Then teachers can track the relationship of the new solution to the learning progression of children across 3 age groups. In the 5th step, teachers will collaborate with local and global learning partners to generate new evidence of their new learning innovation. In the 6th and the last steps, teachers will showcase 1,000 solutions each year at national and global forums to inspire system-level change for improving quality learning at scale. But why we need digital learning, and why Schools 2030 decided to go with digital learning? Due to COVID-19 pandemic, the education system around the world, especially in Afghanistan, were highly disrupted. In March 2020, schools were closed up till now, owing to which students missed 13 out of 18 academic months. In April 2020, Ministry of Education in Afghanistan initiated alternative learning approaches, and through which broadcasted grade 1 to 12 lessons on national radio and television. But unfortunately, the lessons were not accessible in rural and most remote areas, which constitute the most of the population in the country. That's why alternative approaches were very necessary to ensure students can catch up their studies, especially grade 7 to 12 girls who are still out of school. Keeping that in mind, Schools 2030 team in Afghanistan collaborated with our global team to find solution to this educational crisis, focusing on how to support children's learning from home while the schools are closed. It's difficult to speak and also change the slides. While the schools are closed. Through the process of HCD, we wanted to answer the questions of how might we develop and distribute learning materials to grade 1 and 12 government schools, students that cover the MOU required curriculum topics. How might we ensure that the content also supports students' health and well-being? And also, how might we reach to students in rural and isolated communities, including those without access to reliable electricity, internet, or radio? To answer these questions, Schools 2030 team have developed and designed a two-pronged solution which focuses on preparing students, especially girls, academically, psychosocially, and health-wise to safely return and stay in school. We did this by setting up community spaces with rechargeable, low-cost audio-visual equipment, where we then facilitated small group learning sessions and played educational videos accompanied by worksheets for students of all grades. The videos and worksheet topics included subjects of Ministry of Education required curriculum, life skills, psychosocial well-being, and COVID-19 prevention guidelines. This initiative was implemented in 3 provinces in Afghanistan and 34 schools across 102 rural communities, and reached to more than 22,000 students, 85% of which are female. Moreover to that, we have supported supplementary through Moreover to the academic videos, extracurricular videos on psychosocial well-beings were also produced for students to psychosocially prepare them to return to schools after being out of school for almost a year and a half. The learning spaces were also equipped with health kits to ensure students can safely participate in the lessons and practice COVID prevention procedures that were also needed for them when they return back to school. Through this initiative, we impacted the lives of students who keep benefiting from this approach. And we reached to 17,000 students, 90% of them female, through learning materials like SD cards and projectors. We also prepared more than 22,400 students, 86% of them who are female, for their final exams through learning at home worksheets. The worksheet that we designed through Schools 2030 HCD Toolkit are now being used in AKF support supported school and community-based classes in Afghanistan, which is a very big achievement for our project. Through our digital learning program, a total of 164 community members were trained on using the EdTech equipment, COVID prevention practices, and how to best manage small group lessons in community-donated learning spaces. Of the note, 99 health and hygiene kits were distributed through this program to ensure COVID health compliance of this community learning spaces. The current humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, where the local context, especially regarding adolescent girls' education, varies by province, highlights the need of this type of adaptive programming using the HCD process. Because of this digital learning program, girls in grades 7 to 12 who are still out of school, as of new government prepared secondary girls' schools for reopening, we have been able to continue at least some level of learning at home. This will help to reduce the very heightening risk of increased child labor and early marriages. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to keeping to the time. Very interesting initiative, and lots has been done. We do have time for questions from the audience, so I open it. I will try to see if there is a question or a comment that somebody would like to make before we go on. Yeah. Okay, there was a question in the chat. Is the new government supportive of this initiative? And another detail from somebody, what kind of projectors you used, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll just go for the second question first. So the projector we used is called Pico projector or mini rechargeable projectors. It's a small handy projectors which can be recharged just like mobile phones, and it's very easy to carry, and it does not need a lot of, like, it's a low cost and also accessible projectors. And for the second question, I think as the government is in its interim mode, and we really don't know what is their plan. So far, because our approach is community-based and it involves communities, and we have the separate division, like the segregation of gender in our classes. So we really think that this new government is supportive of this program, and we will continue to, because our approach is very much aligned. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There is quite a few more questions, and we still do have some time. One of the questions is about the policy learning organized between the participating countries. As far as we understand, you said there was 10 countries altogether in this, with quite a number of teachers. So maybe something about policy learning between the participating countries.
I'm just not getting the question. Yes, can you just repeat yourself? I'm sorry.
So from the beginning, in the beginning of your presentation, you told us that this is a project that actually is run in 10 different countries. So we're wondering if there is any policy learning between countries.
Okay, so we followed the human-centered design process. Human-centered design it has different, like it has like very basic steps, but for our project, we have contextualized it in all 10 countries. When we did that, though the question was same, how to support, but given the different context in each country came up with different solution, considering their context, their needs, the challenges, and everything. So, so far as I think only Afghanistan has this idea and solution.
Okay, so in a way, the project has an overarching umbrella, but each country is, of course, which it should be doing, contextualizing to their own needs. We also had I guess, an answer for the first question from Rayana in the message, where she says that the new government is supportive of these programs and they continue to ask for similar programs. And then there is a question from our colleagues who deal with monitoring now. So it's not surprising about, is there any monitoring and measurement of the impact of the program?
I think Rayana is also typing. Can you just step up, Rayana, and please answer the question? Oh, she can't unmute herself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So regarding monitoring, we have two types of approaches to monitoring. One is this Promise 3 app, which is a software that we designed with Salesforce and Vera Solutions, and it is translated into local language, and we have trained our teachers on how to use this app. It's tablet-based and it works offline. So it tracks basically student attendance, enrollment, and learning outcomes. So this data will be updated regularly, weekly, monthly. So this data will then upload into a cloud-based system, but the teachers can use it offline too. So they don't have to use the cloud. In order for us to compile the data and analyze the data from a global stance or from a national stance, it has to be uploaded, which we will do when we go to the field. But the teachers themselves can use this information for when they're working to help inform how they do their assessments, which we are also developing learning assessment tools for each grade level, and it's based on the MOE curriculum. So that's one type of monitoring. The second type of monitoring is our regular monitoring, which we do monthly and quarterly through our regular data collection tools like teacher observation, classroom observation, feedback, and all of that for teachers. And then all of this data will be compiled into an annual report that each country will submit to the global team, which will then be compiled into one big report that will be shared during these, it will be like a global conference that we will have where we will share all the information with all our donors and education stakeholders, with the international community as well.
Thank you very much, Rayana. There was another question in the chat or a comment about the importance of the community work, but also the importance of mainstreaming to the policy level. So maybe either one of you could give us just a little bit about any ideas of mainstreaming to policy level before we move to the next presentation. Rayana or Morwared?
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Unmute. We'll unmute Rayana again.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know who did it last time. Something happened in the back.
Oh, thank you. So the reason why we wanted a 10-year longitudinal study, which is not a very common practice, we know in development, usually these studies are very short term, they're done by external researchers. So the reason why we did the 10-year study was to show how these programs impact learning, how these community developed solutions impact learning, and how they can be adjusted for those specific communities. And then the data that we collect over that very long period of time will then be used for policy discussions. So I hope that that clarifies that point of how we bring the information from the community level up into the policy discussion, the policy dialogue.
Thank you very much, Rayana. Thank you very much, Morwared.
Yeah, just to add on Rayana's words. Yeah,
one more sentence.
Yeah. So that's the approach of Schools 2030. We are just thinking from the bottom up approach that whatever the communities, the school level, the classroom level ideas are coming out of schools. So we are just trying to integrate them into a higher like global and national level policies. So this is the idea wholly behind Schools 2030. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on the initiative, and thank you very much for your presentation. I'm inspired with this idea of a 10-year long study. This is really a rarity, unfortunately, especially for us working in non-government sector. It's very difficult to be able to do these things. So thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers. And we move to our next presentation. So now we will move to Kazakhstan. From Afghanistan to Kazakhstan, Daniyar Kussainov and Gulnaz Kordanova from Connect Ed will present on toward digital equality in Kazakhstan. So let's see what is going on in Kazakhstan. Thank you very much.
All right, hello everyone. So here we have Gulnaz Kordanova and Daniyar Kussainov, who are co-founders of the Connected Initiative. This is a grassroots initiative we started last year. And we think that we are working with communities towards digital equality through providing equipment, first of all, and then providing digital skills, and we are moving towards the research. So our mission is to provide quality education through digital empowerment to all kids in Kazakhstan.
Sorry,
And,
sorry for
hello?
interrupting. We don't hear Russian interpretation, just to be sure. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, no worries. Our initiative started last year, and me and Daniyar, we were already working towards providing quality education in Kazakhstan project, since in Kazakhstan there's a big digital divide between rural areas and cities and also regions. So last year, in the midst of pandemic in April, we realized that in Kazakhstan, by the briefing of the Minister of Education in Kazakhstan, there are 300,000 school children from rural areas, especially, who don't have equipment to study remotely. And as we all know, and it was presented by other speakers, almost all students needed to transition into remote learning. So in our case, what we started to do is we provided equipment first to kids from vulnerable populations from regions who are left without parental care and with special educational needs. In Kazakhstan, unfortunately, there are 22% of school children, despite the coverage of 90% of broadband internet, they are not connected to the high quality speed internet. So those are all were limits to study online. When we started to provide equipment, we realized that there is a big lack of digital skills in our communities. So when we started to give out these laptops, tablets, and phones, we realized that some of our stakeholders and beneficiaries, they never seen laptop and they don't know how to use them for their studies. So what we started to do as an initiative, we started to create digital literacy courses that are very accessible for everyone in the communities. So we decided to get rid of all the limitations like internet. So we know that everyone has WhatsApp. We know that everyone has access to YouTube channel. So what we created is that we created basic digital literacy courses in YouTube, and it's in open access, and we started to distribute it among communities. So here are some statistics about ISIL's International Computer and Literacy Study, where Kazakhstan participated in 2018. And unfortunately, we were the last country among 14 countries, and we were only Central Asian country that participated in this study. And according to ISIL's, 54% of 8th graders in Kazakhstan, they scored the lowest percentage of digital literacy skills. So we can imagine that during the pandemic, this was a huge challenge for kids to study. So some of the kids in Kazakhstan in cities who have quality education and good access to internet, they were able to, of course, join through this kind of synchronous sessions like we are now, through Zoom, through other Google Meet platforms. But most of the kids in Kazakhstan, they utilize WhatsApp and other messengers to be online and to keep on studying.
So what we have achieved during the more than 1 year of operation, we collected 211 units of equipment and distributed among the most vulnerable families. And more than 700 children got access to the equipment. Why you see this difference in the numbers? Because the most of our beneficiaries are they have multiple children, and according to our statistics, it's up to 9 children in one family. So that's why we see this more than 700 children that finally have access, because they are sharing newly obtained equipment, laptops with all other siblings. And we so far we delivered more than 35 online lessons for computer literacy, but it's not only for the children, but also for their parents. And we started before to make it all these online lessons only for our beneficiaries. But then we realized that there is a huge need in this computer literacy courses, and we opened it for everyone. And a short story about the milestones of our project Connected. So we officially started in May 2020, and we formed the team, and we received the funding from the Soros Foundation for the initial launching. And in June 2020, we finally launched our online platform, Connected.kz, which is designed to collect the applications for donors. And they make applications, and our team members are contacting them to collect this used equipment from them. And also at that time we started our like a volunteers program, and now we have our army of volunteers who are working for short-term tasks such as translations or making some small deliverables for the project. And as Gulnaz described before, we launched our YouTube channel with a free online courses on December 2020. In February 2021, we launched our open and closed online courses on the computer literacy. And in July this year, we finally could say that we are more or less sustainable, because if we compare the team composition like we had at the beginning and now, we have a substantial increase in the number of team members who are joining our team, and we don't have stable financial sources, but we are still operating, and we are still collecting equipment. But now we are just to reduce our cost for delivery, we are focusing our efforts for the corporate for the corporations who can donate the equipment in larger amounts than the population of Kazakhstan. So lessons learned of the Connected. We realized that unfortunately our initiative is really in need in Kazakhstan, and we have a request from the society to deliver online literacy courses, to get the equipment to continue education, even though our school children started this school year offline. They still don't have computers at home. And second lesson is that for the people who are passionate about something, you'll get easy support from the population, which is really giving us hope and some strength that almost every day we are receiving support letters from our followers in Instagram or everywhere. And quite recently, we had our Instagram follower. She made climbing to the Elbrus, to the highest peak of the Europe, and she also collected money for the connected and transferred to us. And the third lessons that we learned, that we are trying to cultivate the culture of giving back to society, and we are like reframing this popular stereotype in Kazakhstan that you could help only if you have a lot of money or financial resources. So we are also trying to convince people that you don't have to have huge amounts of money to donate. You can easily start with donating your time for our initiative. And you see the logos of our main supporters. It's of Soros Foundation Kazakhstan, and Beyond Curriculum. It's also grassroots initiative of the school children from Kazakhstan. They actually from quite privileged schools, but they are trying. They helped us a lot to launch our online courses. And also helpcenter.life. It's a platform. It's our partner. We are collecting the applications from families through that site, because they are volunteers. They have resources to check the families if they are really in need. So they could receive the equipment from us. And where are we going? Our future plans is to be more sustainable, to have long-standing partners with stable influx of the laptops, and we also would like to reinforce our comprehensive and holistic approach to fight the digital inequality, including the advancement of the digital literacy in Kazakhstan. And here you can see our contacts, our email address, website, and Instagram and other social medias. Please follow us and support us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gulnaz, Daniyar. A worthy initiative, and I'm sure there is still a lot of kids who need you to continue your work. But I will open the discussion. Please, if you have a question or a comment for our colleagues from Kazakhstan, from Connect Ed, please put it in a chat. While you're maybe typing, I was wondering if either of you could tell us maybe about the scope of this issue in Kazakhstan. Do you have any information about how many of those children are? I mean, you've reached quite a big number, but knowing the geography, probably.
You mean this 300,000 school children? They don't have computers. It's around approximately 10% of the whole number, but it's official data. So, and we don't know the methodology they used, but what we see that the great need also in the most populated areas of Kazakhstan, which is south of Kazakhstan. And when we see the statistics that of the families that our beneficiaries, were really like shocked that 9 children and a family that they don't have laptops, but also many other basic prerequisites for not only for education but also for living.
So the problem is quite huge, and more needs to. We have a lot of thank yous and well dones on the chat, not a direct question. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, maybe, what is the government doing about it? So this is obviously a grassroots initiative supported by either other NGOs or foundations. Did you see any movement in the government?
Yeah, so at the same time last year, the government also started to provide the equipment to kids, but it was on a kind of a loan basis. So kids needs to return those equipment after the academic year ends. And then as you mentioned, our country is pretty big, and then there's a geographical challenges that like a lot of kids, half of actually school children, they live in rural areas. So it's pretty challenging for government to cover all of these needs, especially in this urgent moment. So we had actually multiple grassroots initiatives like ours, by which intended to provide equipment during pandemic last year. But our goal was to become a sustainable initiative, so we can provide the equipment and the lessons on an ongoing basis. And we were actually inspired by the initiative in Belgium called Close the Gap, which is working for 15 years to close the digital gap. And they are actually collecting the used equipment from the companies, from governmental organizations that are the companies, they replace their equipment every 2 years, but they're still usable. So we are trying to call companies in Kazakhstan that they can donate their equipment to us instead of throwing it out. We can refurbish it, and then give it to kids who are in need. So it's both good for kids and also for the ecology, taking into account the climate change.
Yeah, good for the planet as well. Yes, fantastic. So there is a comment in the chat. Charity is a good thing, but here should be a systemic approach and policy and actions for equal opportunities. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's always great to have a grassroots organization and people interested in closing all the gaps, including the digital one, and working for that. But yes, systemic approach is definitely needed. Yeah.
Yes, we totally agree with that approach. That's why we're trying to not only cover the technological needs of kids, but also, we think that our initiative can help to build human capital in Kazakhstan through closing this digital divide, because now we know that using the technology is not the privilege, it's a necessity. So we're trying to help not only kids, but their parents as well to learn how to use those technology so they can find the better jobs for themselves and support their kids too.
Well, thank you very much. There is lots that we heard from you, and congratulations on your efforts. And I hope that you will be able to bring it to sustainability level. Learning of parents is also quite an interesting part of what you're trying to do. So thank you very much. A round of applause for our speakers, and good luck. And we, unfortunately, we have presenters who have not showed up. So we will move straight away to the fourth presentation, and then there will be much more time for the discussion in the end. So I would like to introduce Pina, Tarricone, Kemran, Mestan, and Jan Tio from the Australian Council for Educational Research, Global Education Monitoring, and their research will be on Asia Pacific. So looking forward to your presentation, so teaching and learning in post-COVID-19 world, the policy monitoring approach. So from the monitoring point of view, I think Pina will start us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation to present at this conference. It's a great opportunity for us to share our work with colleagues. So yes, our presentation is based on a substantial amount of research that we completed and was published in August this year. And we're presenting a small part of that in this presentation. So teaching and learning in a post-COVID-19 world, a policy monitoring approach. So I'm presenting this with my colleagues, Kemran, Mestan, and Ian Teo, and we are from the Australian Council for Educational Research, and this research was funded by the Global Education Monitoring Centre, the GEM Centre, and DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. So if you go to the next slide. So the context of our work was education emergencies. So education emergencies refers to the quality learning opportunities for all ages in situations of crisis. And the types of emergencies that we focused our research on, which was a rapid review of the literature, and we looked at all of these types of emergencies, included natural disasters and communicable diseases such as hurricanes, tsunamis, earthquakes, fires, droughts, floods, and disease epidemics and pandemics. We also looked at documentation in regards to brief or prolonged political conflicts, including warfare, civil conflicts that may result in ethnic cleansing, genocide, forced migration within or towards other countries, complex disasters involving natural disasters, political conflicts, and often affecting refugees, IDPs, returnees, individuals whose lives are disrupted by conflict, but who do not flee from home. So in response to the COVID pandemic, the Global Education Monitoring GEM Centre at the Australian Council for Educational Research engaged in 2 rapid reviews that focused on the impacts of COVID-19 on education systems and aimed to support policymakers responding to and recovering from and preparing for education emergencies in the 3 areas of emergencies that I just outlined, or 3 types of emergencies. So the education emergency evidence base, what we've developed our research has been on 2 main outcomes or 2 main pieces of research. The first was building resilient education systems, a rapid review of the education emergencies literature that was funded by the GEM Centre and by DFAT. And this research identified evidence-based outcomes that support policymakers to build resilient education systems to enhance education quality and equity during emergencies. This was a substantial rapid review of the literature that involved over 200 research papers and policy documents. The second piece of research that is currently in completion, and we should be completing this quite soon and will be available before the end of this year, is a piece of work for NECMAP. It's a thematic review on flexible strategies for ensuring quality learning outcomes. And this piece of research is also had a rapid review approach and involves the investigation of how 14 countries in the Asia Pacific region reacted to the COVID-19 emergency by applying flexible strategies to address learning loss and enhance learner outcomes. So now I'll just pass over to my colleague Kemran, who will talk about the rapid review approach.
Great, thanks, Pina. So just an overview of our rapid review approach. We looked at a range of different documents. So this included education sector plans, COVID-19 education response plans, a GPE, COVID-19 accelerated funding requests. We also looked at a lot of information available online, so websites from key institutions such as UNESCO, for example. And the data for the DFAT funded report was collected over mid to late last year in 2020. And the more recent review was of the NECMAP funded project. And there we did, recently completed that data collection, so middle of this year, where we gathered particularly a lot of the COVID-19 response plans and analysed and compared all those different kinds of documents. So altogether, between the two different kinds of the two different reports, we collected over 250 documents which we analysed. The broad findings we found by reviewing all those different kinds of documents was, firstly, we identified which populations were particularly vulnerable to suffering from education loss and being excluded from education as a result of emergencies occurring. So we looked at 6 different groups of students. Girls, for example, we found were particularly vulnerable in that when schools were closed down, they were less likely to resume education. So girls were often burdened with greater household responsibilities and tasks. And also, if households were short on income, they're less likely to send girls back to school. We found children with disabilities were often excluded with the forms of remote learning that were put in place. So, for example, with digital learning, some of that may not be designed in an inclusive manner or through universal design. Refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced students, many of them were excluded during emergencies because they didn't have access or have a kind of right to access educational institutions. And students from low economic households often suffered from exclusion because their families were unable to afford, say, for example, digital devices, or they had to share devices with a large number of people. And finally, students in remote and rural communities often simply didn't have access at all to that digital infrastructure, so couldn't plug in to and access the content that students in maybe urban areas were more likely to be able to access. In reviewing all the literature, we identified a number of different factors that are particularly important in affecting children's education during emergencies. And we grouped these factors into 3 different categories. And then these categories were overlaid on top of a commonly used education management cycle that is also used, for example, by the INEE, and that's based on preparedness, response, and recovery cycle. So based on that, we created a framework, which you can see here. And this framework is designed to assist policymakers in helping them organise and understand the kinds of activities and considerations that they need to think about in responding to and recovering and preparing to education, to emergencies that affect education, and thereby build a more resilient education system. So you can see in the middle of this diagram, the 3 blue rectangles are our 3 kinds of factors that we identified, where we grouped the many kinds of factors into these categories. So we found that most factors fall into one of these 3 things. So there are system factors, and these system factors involve central processes, practices, networks, relations. Teaching and learning factors are those that largely relate to activities and resources about how teachers teach and how students learn, and agent factors. And these relate to all the different kinds of players in an education system. So it can be teachers or school leaders, education officials, as well as children and parents, of course. So, and then in identifying these factors that affect the education system, it's policymakers then consider these factors in each one of these 3 stages of the education cycle. You can see here we derived a number of considerations for policymakers in developing and building a more resilient education system. So each one of these considerations is grouped into one of those 3 factors. So the systems factors, teaching and learning factors, and agent factors. And then each one of these considerations is itself broken into more specific issues and activities for policymakers to consider in how they go about building a more resilient education system. So in this particular presentation, we're going to focus on 4 particularly pertinent factors related to digital education. As you can see, they're highlighted in yellow. We'll be going to a bit more detail about how policymakers can build more robust ICT infrastructure systems, the things they need to consider in terms of embedding assessment into an education system, implementing digital teaching and learning, and finally applying multiple kinds of teaching modalities. Now, my colleague Ian is going to go into a bit more detail about each one of these 4 considerations.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Okay, so the policy monitoring tool integrates the policy monitoring framework, which was that diagram that we saw just now, with the considerations and issues that have all been informed by the literature. So looking on this slide, we can see that we have the policy considerations in column 2 from the left. And of course, we have the various policy issues associated with these considerations in the middle. The purpose of this tool is to enable policymakers to build a more resilient education system by providing them with a high-level and flexible monitoring tool for prioritizing policy considerations and issues during emergencies. Policymakers use the tool by monitoring to what extent each policy issue is accounted for within their particular education system during an emergency phase of management, which in this case is, of course, preparedness, response, and recovery. Ideally, they should be allocating each issue with a risk rating of low to very high, depending on their specific education system needs. So the take-home message here is that if this tool is used continuously for monitoring, then of course these ratings should change over time to approximate targeted risk levels within that education system. So it is, in a sense, flexible, to meet the needs of any education system that it's used within. Now, a policy consideration, of course, may not be relevant for a given education system. So in this case, policymakers have also that flexibility to not utilize that particular consideration or issue as they see it required. So in this slide, you can see the rating system is color-coded to make it easier for policymakers to very quickly identify which considerations and issues need more attention during a particular management phase. Now, if I were to imagine myself putting on my policymaker hat and perhaps auditing the current state of policy within my education system during the current and ongoing pandemic, I might be inclined to do a few things. Okay, so I'll try to give you an example. With policy issue 1.4.1, which is the very first one at the top, which talks about access to digital technology and the need for it to be broadened. Within Australia, it may be the case, for example, that schools and education systems already have a very robust and established ICT system. And to that extent there, during the response to the recovery phase, our risk is relatively low, all right? And I think in most developed countries, we see this general pattern where the risk is relatively low. Yes, not all schools do the job well. Not all schools and teachers are prepared to access internet technology or digital technology, but for the most part, there is sufficient infrastructure there. The very high risk, however, may be the case that schools, perhaps in Australia, are unprepared for other forms of emergencies into the future, whether it's medium term or long term. And it may, for example, be earthquakes or hurricanes or radiation leaks from a nuclear power plant. And so from a policy monitoring perspective, we want to make sure that I am able to anticipate these demands within the context of my education system. Okay, I'll just pick two more policy issues just to expand a bit more, and I'll move on from there. So with item 2.1.1, which talks about whether digital technology devices are provided to students in need, it may be the case that in my particular country, there is a very high response risk. And this is because the short-term classroom assessments have not been developed for my particular education system. At the recovery phase, it may already be the case that medium and longer term assessments are not significant because it is a centralized government that looks after terminal degree assessments, for example. And so therefore, these have been planned in advance for many years on end. With preparedness, once again, it may be that terminal exams have not been addressed across a range of emergency situations. So therefore, there is a need and there's a high risk within that context there. Okay, moving on to the next slide and looking at policy issue 2.3.3, which in this case talks about digital teaching and learning modalities, whether they're blended with other modalities or not. So once again, 2.3.3. There may be a medium risk at the response phase because a digital platform has been developed at a reasonable speed to house teaching and learning resources and materials over the short term. But when it comes to the recovery phase, there could be a very high risk. This could be that the timing of the emergency, for example, at the end of the academic year, means that policymakers have very limited opportunities to support their learners as they transition to the next stage of schooling and to successfully develop curriculum, pedagogy, and assessments to support blended learning over the medium term. Okay, and then finally, of course, with preparedness, this being a high risk, due to the unfolding emergency, it may be the case that there is a lack of information and ongoing information to support preparedness processes. So what I've tried to highlight here is the fact that this policy monitoring tool can be suited to different contexts. It is flexible, and that's really its one of its main characteristics. If we move on to the next slide, we'll note that another key characteristic is that it is also a high-level tool as well. It is not meant to be details because, as we've seen from the various presentations today, I think we're fairly across the types of details that occur at the grassroots level or even at the medium level, and the type of challenges that people face. But in terms of policymakers and their particular needs, there may be greater demand for perhaps support. And I suppose this is where our tool comes in. So to reiterate, the purpose of our tool is to enable policymakers to build a more resilient education system by providing them, once again, with a high-level and flexible policy monitoring tool for prioritizing policy considerations and issues. We hope that our policymakers may find use for this because they're able to adapt this tool for their own purposes across national, regional, and local policy demands. They can, of course, target specific policy risks and considerations as required rather than use the full complement, so that there is no need to use everything all at once. But perhaps most importantly, this tool also provides policymakers with the opportunity to revise and further develop their policy documentation, processes, and protocols at national, regional, local levels to suit an emergency management process. And I think maybe this is probably one of the bigger discussions at a high level that we could perhaps engage in, and that we need to engage in moving forward. All right, I'll pass on to Pina to close this up. Thank you, Pina.
Thank you, Kemran. Thank you, Ian. So yes, so just to recap, the key point that Ian made in terms of the flexibility of the tool is something that we want to reinforce because it's not a linear tool, it's not a static tool, it's something that could be adapted to different contexts and different situations. And as Ian said, there may be some aspects of the tool that may not be applicable, but there may be other variables or factors or issues that need to be added to the tool to meet the needs of that particular context. So in regards to that, we would like to, if there are any organisations or countries or ministries of education that are interested in working with the GEM Centre to further to support them in the use of the tool within their particular context, and that could be in regards to just applying the tool or a case studies approach, a collaboration. that's our next piece of work that we would like to engage in. And also, I think we can finish off now with the next slide. These are our main research contributions. So you can find the actual report. It's published, it's on the ACR research repository, and the report contains the policy monitoring framework and the policy monitoring tool. Now, Ian presented only one aspect of the tool that was applicable for this particular presentation. But as Kemran mentioned, there are three main factors, and the tool covers all of those three factors with considerations and particular issues. And the other piece of work, as I mentioned earlier, is a thematic review, flexible strategies for ensuring quality learning outcomes, and that will be available in late 2021. That will also be made available on the ACR research repository and also on the NetMap website. So I'd like to thank you for your time and listening to our presentation. If you have any particular questions, happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Extremely important monitoring tool, and I of course open for the chat for any questions. Maybe my question, it seems maybe it's too soon, but do you have any experience with the ministries using this, or it's just a tool that you've prepared hoping the ministries will use it?
Yes, it's the latter, Lana. We prepared this tool knowing that there was a gap. The way that we approached this work, initially we were asked to do some research around equity and home-based learning. And in working with my team, we discovered that there is a major gap here in terms of how do we support policymakers, how do we support ministries of education, and that was actually drawn from the fact that the pandemic, although countries have been dealing with other emergencies prior to the pandemic, they've had other strategies. What have they been doing? So we wanted to look at that literature first to try and pull that together. And obviously our rapid review only contains what we could find publicly. So we're not saying that it's totally comprehensive. That's why we say that the tool is a flexible tool and it can be adapted and advised by the current policies of countries and ministries of education. And that's a very important thing. But, we did actually look at quite a substantial amount of literature and we approached it in a very methodological way as well. So yes, we're hoping to use the tool and work with interested parties to do that.
Great, Pina, thank you so much. I mean, definitely a useful tool. Kemran, can I ask you to close so that we can see everybody? Great. Yeah, I think somehow coming from this region of Southeast Europe, Central Asia, Caucasus, we find our policymakers are not very prone to using tools in general or monitoring in general. So I'm wondering, there are no questions, but I'm wondering if we can maybe open this discussion also about policies or governments and the use of their tools. I think it would be very important to get them to start using tools for the benefit of all. Any comments? Yeah, there's a question of if it's relevant to any particular type of conflict, natural, political, but I guess any type of emergency.
No, it is context and conflict neutral. So it means that the user, the education system policymakers, the ministries of education, school leaders can use this policy monitoring tool, and it can be adapted to take into consideration the particular conflict or the issues arising from the conflict or natural disaster, etc. Because all emergencies are not the same, and we're not saying that they are.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering that comment. Let's see. No, any more questions or comments or general feeling about monitoring policy tools or examples of something that you've seen in your countries?
I might ask Ian or Kemran if you have any comments. Ian?
No, I'm fine. Yeah.
Kemran, is there anything that you want to share? Anything that we've missed?
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll definitely be looking into the tool and seeing if
Yes, please be in contact with us.
Definitely. Thank you so much. A round of applause for you, but we do still have around 20 minutes and we could open up to all the papers that we've seen and have a discussion, since we've had one presentation missing. We do have this opportunity for further discussion. And I think even that now there is 53 of us, so it's difficult to have a conversation. But even if somebody would like to speak rather than send messages and typing, I think we can afford the time for that now. So please. There's a question then for is there a role for citizen alert work in your projects in general for everybody? Yeah. Anybody?
So if you could unmute and like maybe clarify that, that would be great. So I can. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about the initiative that you're doing there. What we find is that, of course, in EIE situations, people are relying much more on citizen-led initiatives or programs. And I'm wondering, in your situation, is there a scaling up to perhaps include citizen-led programs or initiatives to further your work in this?
Yes, so actually, yeah, all of our, like most of our work is based on the help of volunteers and the active citizens. So we initially started our work as in the Almaty region where we are based in, but because of the demand, we started to spread the initiative across the Kazakhstan with the help of these volunteers who are on the ground in the communities. So what we do is we ship those equipment to the small initiatives across the Kazakhstan, and then they make sure that laptop is working. They show it to kids and parents, show how to log into Zoom, so those basic stuff. So that's how we're expanding it through the communities. Because we cannot go everywhere in Kazakhstan. It's again like pretty big. So that's why we're working with communities and much heavily like rely on their support. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Gulnaz. Thank you, Jan. Would anybody else like to comment or say something, or just if not, I'm looking at Jose, but I think it's fine that we close since we had one session less.
Yeah, so we have the opportunity for people to unmute themselves, or to raise their hand.
Yes.
Ask any comments. So I would give it one more minute. It can be a minute of silence, or it can be a minute where people freely unmute themselves and start asking questions. If not, we just have a longer break before our next sessions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jose. Some contemplation maybe and reflection for a minute, and then we see if there is further comments. Okay, Anara, you have raised your hand. Please go ahead. You can unmute yourself, please.
Okay.
I'm afraid I haven't.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Hello.
Anara, go ahead, please.
So it's Anara Karibaeva. Sorry, Anara Karibaeva. Yeah. So I just want to it's not kind of question, it's kind of recommendation for Gulnaz Kordanova, for her team, I mean with Daniyar. Yeah, so I've heard about your initiative and about your project, it's nice. but better. So I also kind of representative of one center for it, kind of teacher training center. And then better if you like spread it. I also just typed a comment there in chat box. So better, yeah, kind of if you try to involve all like spheres, higher education, I mean secondary education, and like these kind of centers for on training, like training centers for teachers, and all of us. And then we also have UNICEF Kazakhstan, and then plenty of volunteers are there. I also am a volunteer there. So we are happy and ready to help you in spreading, because I from eastern part of Kazakhstan Sea. So it's like, will be a great job. So we are welcome. Thank you. You are welcome, sorry.
Thank you, Nara, very much, and great that we are connecting people who can continue to work on this initiative. That's fantastic. We had a voice from one speaker who didn't raise a hand, but I would ask them also. But now we have Victoria who has raised her hand. So Victoria, go ahead, and I'm just going to try and find out who wanted to speak also. Victoria, go ahead.
Thank you. I represent the Association Montessori International to UNESCO, and we have training programs and programs in over 40 countries. And the issue of evaluation was one that I found particularly interesting of Afghanistan, I think, of having the 10-year cycle. And I think we should all really push to have this longer cycle, because as you're working with communities, things evolve. It's very slow in the beginning because people need to have trust and security and build all of that. But as you progress and as people gain ownership of the process, then more and more you can have very good outcomes. But if you only have a 3-year cycle, it's like you're starting over from scratch every time, because as the people say, you know, I mean, the dogs park and the caravan moves on. So I am interested, our organization, in finding ways to really support feasible ways of the community-based types of approach that involve the teachers, the learners, the parents, and this longer term cycle. So I really commend you, and I'm interested in learning more about what you're doing, and anything we can do to help in whatever way, you know, we will try digitally to provide support, even if it's just moral support at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, very much. And yes, it's a definite, this long-term the projects of 3 years that we are all suffering from, I would say, and the idea that we're moving on to either a new community or a new topic too quickly without actually being able to work with. I think it's something that we can give a message to the donors of this world, is that really education doesn't work, and we've tried, and we've been doing this for a long time, trying to prolong these projects in order to actually do the real work. And thank you, Victoria, for that and for your support. There was a hand up and down at one point, but we're still happy to have a discussion. So if anybody. If you're not, if you don't know how to maybe raise the hand, you can also just turn your mic on and speak. Okay, I think this is where we end. Once again, thank you very much to all the speakers. Thanks you for joining the conference, for the discussion, for the questions. I hope we continue to connect throughout the conference that goes on today, and for the next 3 Thursdays after that. And I'm sure I will be meeting all of you. Thank you so much, and see you after the break.
Thank you so much, Lana. And please be on the lookout for the next parallel sessions. They will start at 1:30 p.m., which is more or less in 40 minutes. You have the links. I just posted here the link to the agenda where all the Zoom links are there. So we hope that you can join into the next discussions, next two parallel sessions. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much, Lana, for masterfully chairing the session.
Thank you so much, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.